If you're anything like me, you've probably been checking the Dark and Darker Reddit and Discord daily, wondering when our beloved game would return. And while I don't have any news on that front, I have had a lot of time to think about what truly makes Dark and Darker so special. So in this video, I'm going to go over 5 things that I think really make Dark and Darker the game it is, and why we are all so in love with it. I think obviously first up is it's this melee focused combat that has really cool ranged options. You still have spells and bows and arrows, but one of the most frustrating things in an extraction looter is getting one tapped out of nowhere. We've all had that experience in Tarkov where you're just running around, you don't even hear anything thanks to the desync, and all of a sudden you fall over and you're spending another 5-10 minutes waiting to get into your next match. So Dark and Darker obviously has the quick load times as well, but because it's melee focused, for the most part, you see engagements before they happen, aside from the odd rogue, and generally it feels pretty good. When you lose a fight in Dark and Darker, you usually can think of 2 or 3 things you could have done differently to avoid losing that fight, and at least get away, even if you were completely outmatched in terms of gear. So that's one thing that I think is absolutely critical about making Dark and Darker so successful, is this really tight melee combat with really fun ranged options, with projectile based, so you can dodge them, and it feels really skill based, and you always have a way to improve. Another thing that makes Dark and Darker so fun is the deadly environments. We all had that experience in our first few dungeon delves, wandering up to a skeleton footman and thinking, I can just take this guy on, and then realizing after a couple swings, holy smokes, these things hit hard. And we've also all been sniped by the new crossbow skeletons. Sometimes it feels like there might be a little bit of tuning, but this is honestly pretty much a get good situation, right? Once you learn the mobs, they're pretty easy to deal with, but in the chaos of a fight, especially in a PvP encounter, having these really deadly mobs is pretty fun, and it scales nicely with better gear, so even if you're going in relatively geared, you still have to think a little bit about how you're dealing with the mobs, but it does get quite a bit easier. So those deadly environments, absolutely one of the things that I love about Dark and Darker. Number 3 is the unique classes with customizable loadouts. So between having 2 active abilities you can swap out, 2 weapon sets, 4 perk slots, a growing number of classes, so many different playstyles. You have wizards and clerics with spell lists and additional spells coming out all the time, which allows even more customization. The bard with their songs. There's so many different ways you can build your character in Dark and Darker, and it really has that RPG feel of the way you're playing your character, whether you're going for like the sneaky rogue or like maximum damage, you want the hand crossbow, you want the rapier, so many different weapons and play styles. It's so fun to just pick up a new character, make a new character, play a new class, and it's always fresh. Number 4, multi-level raids. So this is actually something that a lot of extraction shooters had kind of talked about, and by a lot I mean mostly Tarkov, but the idea of being able to go kind of in like this open world feel, or like from raid to raid, and having the portal system with the red portals taking you down to another level in Dark and Darker. In its current implementation, we don't know exactly how they might change this in the future, but I think the current implementation is actually really part of what makes Dark and Darker special, because even though they've had some ideas about how they might change it in the future, the current system of one full lobby with lots of PvP action, and you're fighting to get to those portals, and then you get to a second lobby that only has a few escapes, but it has way more loot and way higher mobs, and it's more of like a PvP dungeon, is really, really cool, because you're kind of battling it out with the other teams in order to get the privilege of going to the high loot dungeon. And even once you get there, the chances of another team being there, while low, if there is one, they're probably also very geared, and there's not enough escapes for everyone. So it's a really, really cool game design choice, and it's one of those things where it almost happened accidentally, because from the outset I don't think it was intentionally designed to be simply 2 levels and with no filling, but I think not filling the second floor of the dungeon really makes it interesting, and it'll be interesting to see how this changes in the future. But for me, I think the multi-level raids with 2 floors, no backfilling, actually is part of what makes Dark and Darker special. And finally, inventory management. Honestly, the old school inventory Tetris is one of my favorite things about Dark and Darker. And because your gold actually takes up space in your stash, it forces you to use your gear because you can't just sell it all and hoard gold infinitely. At the end of the day, you eventually reach a point where it's worth it to have higher value items than gold in your stash, and eventually you just don't have enough room, so you just start bringing it into your raids. Even if you're playing solo or kind of ratting it out, you're going in with what you have because you don't have space to put anything you might loot, which for someone like me with rat-like tendencies is a great design feature. And I actually really like how the inventory system encourages you to use your gear and really think about what you're bringing in. And when you're even going into a raid, you have to think about how many potions you're bringing, how many bandages you're going to bring. When you're bringing out loot, you're thinking about the treasures and the value. Are you bringing in valuable gear? Are you going to bring out lots of gold? And if your friend dies, which items are you going to grab? And that inventory management system really has a cool sort of flavor and feel, but it also implements, or it creates, quite a few interesting design or decision points for the player. So yeah, that's what I've been thinking about. Honestly, I've been thinking about the game a lot, and I'm really excited to play. I really hope in the next couple of months, once some of these legal problems go away, we get to see Dark and Darker again. But in the meantime, thanks for watching. I'm going to be doing a lot more Dark and Darker content once the game's back out. But for now, take it easy, and I'll catch you in the next one.